When people talk about citizenship by investment, they usually ask questions like, how fast can I get this passport? Or what are the countries that I can travel to visa-free? Or how much would it cost me and my family to get this passport? Or should I go for the donation route, or is it better to buy real estate? Now, all of those are very valid questions, but they're the wrong starting point, because you're looking at this as if you're buying a product. But how you should be looking at it is that you're entering into a relationship with a country. My name is Mostafa, and on this channel, I cover global mobility, residency, and citizenship by investment with a focus on clarity, strategy, before solution. Today, I want to shift how you think about citizenship by investment. Because if you purely approach this as a transaction, then you're going to be missing out on all the risks that actually matter. Let me simplify something almost no one talks about. A passport is just a document. A citizenship is the relationship behind it. A passport is what you hold in your hand, what gets you through borders. It probably sits in your drawer. But a citizenship, your actual citizenship, it ties you to something much larger. It ties you to a country's laws, to its political trajectory, to its international reputation, to relationships with other countries, as well as the future decisions of governments that you did not elect and cannot control. And once you understand that distinction, a citizenship by investment can stop looking like a simple purchase and start looking like what it actually is, which is a long-term geopolitical decision. And the uncomfortable reality here is that the way these programs are marketed today is not how they will age tomorrow. Because today you might have a program that is perfectly legal, that has been actively operating, is well regarded internationally, but how things will progress over the years, you don't really know. Because governments can change, political priorities can shift, international scrutiny might happen, diplomatic relationships can change, and unfortunately, sometimes those changes happen quickly. This is why focusing only on speed, cost, or visa-free access is not really enough. The right starting point and what you need to be asking yourself is, what am I tying myself to in the long term? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to explain to you 3 key risks that I think all CBI buyers should examine properly before they go into such a transaction. The first risk is political backlash, and this really can come from 2 different directions. The first one is from inside the country, where a new government that has been elected has a completely different view of the citizenship by investment program, where one program has been introduced by an administration and it was viewed as an economic tool, whereby another administration comes in and starts to look at it and starts to curtail it, reform it, maybe even shut it down. The second direction is from the outside, where larger powers or international bodies can start to apply pressure on certain programs or on certain countries. And this is not really theoretical. We've seen many examples of that happen over the years. And most recently, last year in 2025, was the Malta program. Malta had an investor program where people could acquire a citizenship by investment. And that program was completely scraped away because the EU believed that a citizenship shouldn't be reduced to a commercial transaction. See, Malta's program was actually legal. It was operating for a number of years. It's not like it was a secret or anything of the sort. Nevertheless, it was still shut down. And this is not the first example, and it's not the first time we see different cases of EU scrutiny around different programs. And this was clear in Cyprus when it shut down its program, in Portugal when it significantly curtailed its golden visa, in Ireland when it ended its investor visa. So the lesson from all of this is not that citizenship by investment is inherently illegitimate or anything like that. On the contrary, those programs were legal, were active, were operating for years, and were highly respected. But again, it shows you that these programs are politically fragile. And the political risk is real, and it is documented, and it comes from multiple directions at once. The second risk is revocation risk. And most people think this really doesn't apply to them because they're going to do everything right. Now, that assumption unfortunately misses half the picture because there are two revocation scenarios and they operate differently. The first is the individual's fault. And this is what most people think this is about, is that you lied about something in your application, you misrepresented something, you omitted certain information, or you simply forgot about something that's important. Another part of it is how your file was handled, your agents, your licensed representatives, how they handled the entire process. Did they follow everything and all the standards to the letter? Did any intermediary cut any corners that they shouldn't have? All of this can eventually reflect negatively on you, irrespective of whether you knew or not. And we've seen a recent example of that in 2025, where Saint Kitts and Nevis revoked the citizenships of 13 different investors along with their dependents, and they blacklisted a marketing firm as well. All of this for what? Because they failed to pay the required statutory minimum for that investment. The second revocation scenario is the one where most people never consider. It's more unsettling. Several CBI jurisdictions have reserve powers that allow citizenships to be revoked in cases of national interest or damage to the country's international reputation or changed political circumstances. Now, the threshold for what triggers these powers is not always clearly defined in the legislation, and that ambiguity matters. Now, what that means is that you could have done everything right. You could have done the proper investment, full compliance, a clean file, everything was done to the letter. And yet you can still face revocation risk if the political system in that country changes. If the government decides that its program was misused at a systemic level and they initiate a review, individual holders will get caught up in the process irrespective of whether or not they did something wrong. The third risk is very subtle, and this is reputation risk. Even if your citizenship is entirely valid, that does not mean that it will always be perceived in a good way by all the institutions and the systems that you need to operate through. Because what you need to remember is that you're not just inheriting a passport, you're inheriting how the world sees it. So what does that mean? Let's take a look at an example in banking, where compliance teams at major banks will typically look at your nationality, your passport, to assess and do their regulatory procedures such as the KYC or the AML. And certain CBI programs, especially those that come from jurisdictions that have weaker due diligence reputation or a history of any controversy, will typically trigger enhanced due diligence. So what that means in practice is that your account opening procedure will probably be longer. You'll be asked more in-depth questions. You'll probably have to provide more documentations. And in some cases, unfortunately, some people get rejected. And this is not really a reflection on you, but it's a reflection on your passport or your nationality, because some banks have certain risk frameworks for certain nationalities, and that has nothing to do with you. It's just the association with the passport that you're carrying. And it's not just about banking. This can show up in different ways. For example, if you're trying to apply for a visa to go to a different country, if you're at an immigration desk trying to cross the border of a certain country, you could be subject to interrogation or enhanced questions, how certain counterparties might perceive you or run background checks on you. None of this means that citizenship by investment is the wrong choice. On the contrary, for the right person, with the right program, and approach with the right level of scrutiny, this can be one of the most strategic decisions you can ever make. But the difference between a strategic decision and a mistake is almost always the type of questions that you ask before getting to that decision. So instead of starting with speed, with cost, with visa-free access, start by asking yourself, how politically stable is this program? And has there been any history of external pressure? How rigorous is the due diligence process, and does that protect me as a holder? And under which conditions can this citizenship be revoked from me? And is that clearly articulated in the legislation? How do major banks or compliance teams treat the holders of this passport? And how has this program been over the last decade? Has it been stable? Has there been any curtailment, any controversies? And the most important question of all is, am I solving the right problem with the right tool? Because for some people, a citizenship by investment might not be the best solution to their problem. Understanding what your problem is, what your goals and your needs are, is the key to be able to choose the right solution for you. Because for some profiles, a residency can actually do a much better job than a citizenship would ever do. Or a citizenship at another jurisdiction would actually be more helpful to your situation. So the tool should fit the problem, not the other way around. So my advice to you is, don't think like a buyer trying to evaluate a product. Think like someone choosing a country to be legally and politically tied to, because that's essentially what you're doing. So here's a question I want to leave you with. Out of the three risks, political backlash, revocation risk, and reputation risk, which one of those concerns you the most in your current situation? Let me know in the comments, and if this kind of thinking about investment migration is useful to you, then please subscribe. This is exactly what this channel is here for.